Social Security, the cost of living adjustment was 5.9%. Should I be worried about inflation? How does it affect my retirement and my expenses?
Yeah. So Social Security had announced the highest increase in their cost of living increase at 5.9%, highest in the last 40 years. And so that's a good thing in a way. Unfortunately, the reason they're doing that is because the basket of goods that they look at have increased by 5.9%. And so it's a little bit of an offset, right? So, hey, you're going to get more money, but it's probably going to cost more, the grocery store and those types of things. But the nice thing is that we're going to get more money. And that's super important because all of those colas that we deal with, the cost of living increases, the bigger that base is, the more it grows. If you get a 1% next year after a 5.9, it's a good thing altogether. I think it's really a nice situation as far as that goes. But it does show that there's an inflationary pressure. And so how does that affect the stock market, right? Which is the other area that might be important to you, in your retirement or if you're heading towards your retirement. Um, Higher inflationary periods. Sorry, let me get a drink here. Higher inflationary periods are um, are kind of interesting. So, if you I saw a study just recently that was very fascinating to me, and it showed that really the worst periods for the stock market is when inflation moves quickly. And so, if we look at the 10-year treasury when it jumps in a fast fashion versus a more even fashion, which makes sense. If you look at a company that's trying to deal with the products and the things that are coming in, you know, having your inputs jump up in price really quickly before you can really increase the prices of your product, and that it can eat up some of the earnings as far as that goes. Excuse me, got a little bug. And so overall, I think this environment will probably not be quite as inflationary as we're seeing here now. That will probably slow down. The Federal Reserve has been talking about 2022 being a much more normal year. So we'll see how that plays out. Having said that, the Federal Reserve is saying now that they think some of this transitionary inflation will be more less transitionary than thought. So it's hard to tell exactly what's going to happen. It's been a long time since we've been through a pandemic and a reopening, um, but it's a concern. It's something to think about. It's something to watch. But again, trying to project what it's going to do and then react to that hasn't been working right now. You're better off watching how this plays out, setting up kind of a broad-based portfolio that can cover all the different bases, and then react to those situations. So if inflation truly does come, because we've been talking about inflation since 2008, it hasn't come yet. This year's inflation is really a result of a reopening, a supply chain that's been closed down, and the fact that we're coming off of a last year's numbers that were very low, right? So we'll see how that plays out. So how much happens next year will be a much more interesting piece to me. But just watch the price, watch what's going on in the market, and we'll be able to tell and listen to these earning calls to see how much impact we're seeing of inflation on the price. If we don't know what the demand elasticity is either, which just means that if a company can continue to increase its prices and still get the same amount of sales because there's so much savings on the sidelines and so much pent up demand to buy things, then their profits could stay the same, right? Theoretically. So, those are the things we have to see yet. We don't know. And again, I wouldn't bet against the American consumer and I would not have bet against the American companies to be able to figure out how to do this. But if they don't, we'll see it. We'll see it in the price and we'll react to that and deal with that and figure out which companies can do better than others, in that type of environment. But it's a good question.
Where do you feel like wage growth kind of plays into inflation? Because I know wages are a very key component of it.
Yeah, wage growth is more permanent to me. If you go from $7 an hour that you're paying everybody to $10 an hour, and then the labor market picks back up and people start applying again, you're probably not cutting everybody back down to $7 an hour. And so, that's where the more permanent portion of inflation plays a role. And long term, it's the one thing that seems to bother the economists and the different stock market, people the most, is this concept of a tight labor market, which ironically we have now. Even though we have, lots and lots of people unemployed and lots of job openings, we still don't have many people actually taking these jobs. And so it is an issue. I think it's probably the biggest issue of all the different things, and maybe one of the hardest to actually answer. Long term, we'll answer it through automation, artificial intelligence, robotics. I'm telling you, these companies aren't going to sit there for the next 10 years and just hope for people to come out to work. They'll find ways to make their products, because as wage raises, it just brings in, like one of the things we saw here in California, when they went to a higher minimum wage, is all of a sudden you started to see more of these kiosks. Like you go into McDonald's and you order on a kiosk. They took those all out after the pandemic because nobody wanted to touch anything. But that's that type of stuff. But the idea was that if for that much money, hey, we can get this kiosk, which is more expensive than paying somebody a cheaper minimum wage. And so there is some replacement that's going to happen here as far as that goes. That will be an issue. I don't know that that's a good thing, honestly, because people need to work. But it seems to be a trend that's going to happen. Factories are becoming more automated, and I think that's going to continue. We saw a lot of big outbreaks in these meat packing plants in the Midwest, for example. I bet you there's a lot more automation that comes into those places, as we go forward here. So wage is a big issue. We'll have to see how it actually plays out.